Hello everyone. Welcome to another exciting Tuesday stream here for all of my Patreon supporters. How is everyone doing here this fine Tuesday night? I am Jason Bolman. I'm the director of game design at Paizo, the creator of Pathfinder, and the writer-designer behind the Eventide setting. And tonight, we are going to talk about the playtest adventure. We're going to chat a bit about the second group, because I have two playtest groups that I'm running through this adventure. The second group has now had their first session, so we got a little bit of a meet and greet on the characters. I'm going to talk a little bit about their adventures, and then beyond that, I want to talk about what's about to come up, because later on this week, the first group is going to play their second session. Then early next week, the second group is going to play their second session. So by the time we meet next Tuesday, I will have both groups to talk about again. So this should establish the kind of normal pattern going forward, is that after every 2 weeks, I've got a session talking about prep. Then both the games will happen. Then I have a session of wrap-up. So we should get into a nice rhythm on that front. So we got that going. I'm excited to talk about that. And I think, if time allows, I might even show the evolution of some of the art that I'm getting in. There has been some movement on that front. I'm excited to be working with the artist that I am. And he has sent me some color sketches. And I think last week I showed off a black and white pencil sketch of the Gloamling. I now have a color rough. So I may show that off here at the end. We'll save some time for some Q&A here, assuming we have a few moments. So let's talk about this second group here. So when I first set up this adventure, right, I made the decision of having two groups to go and explore this introductory adventure. Both groups would experience mostly the same things, right? I'm not going to be rewriting or drastically altering the scenarios between sessions, although I should note that I did add an additional lighter encounter in one of the rooms that no one had explored yet, so that's not really a change that either one of them is going to notice. This second group also has 5 characters. I don't know that 5 is really the norm. The adventure that I've written assumes 4 and then talks about how to modify all the challenges if you have 5 or 6. So most encounters have a little bit that's just like, oh yeah, if there's more players, add another one of these little monsters, or add a few hit points to this monster. And that's it. It's just a quick and easy way to adjust some of the difficulties. I may do something a bit more robust at some point, but for right now, I don't think that's necessary. There is something that I think if you go all the way up to 6, some groups, you might want to actually make the monster an elite. You may want to kind of bump its stats just to make it a bit more of a threat. But for now, we'll let it roll as it is. So I think for 5, it's working out just fine. So this other group also has 5 players. So the first character is a character called Dremmond Vale. Dremmond Vale is a human penumbrist. So I have a penumbrist in each group. That's interesting. This one is a snarler. So the penumbrist in the other group is a jester penumbrist. So is more jokey and whimsical. This one is a snarler and is far more serious and grim. Character is, the type who dresses all in blacks and grays and doesn't talk much. So we don't know a lot about him yet, but that is the kind of setup on that character. The next character we have is Aelia Crestwillow, who is a Seneschar elf. So this is another option from the Eventide Player's Guide. They are the elves that their features change with the seasons. So in spring, they have greenish hair. It turns to, bright shining gold in the summer. In the winter, it fades to kind of oranges and browns. And then in winter, it fades even further into like pale grays before revitalizing for the spring. And their other features kind of change and alter with the season as well. So I've got a Centaur elf who is a sorcerer, and I don't believe anybody in the group knows this yet, but she is a gold dragon sorcerer. So that her bloodline is gold dragon, which makes her exceedingly rare in the world of Eventide. Not entirely, but their ilk is fading from the world rather quickly. So that's Aelia Crestwillow. Is noble born, and is in town to complete a rite that has gone kind of terribly wrong. They have part of her backstory is that she is to deliver a gift to the elders of Wormbone, but she can't because it got stolen. So, but that really hasn't manifested itself yet because we're doing the adventure. So the next character is Solina Regard. She is a human war priest cleric of Astramari. And this character has undergone a little bit of changes, so I don't know a lot about her new kind of direction. She kind of decided to make some changes to the character between the first and second session. So we've already talked about it, and that's led to some adjustments in the name, and frankly, her deity as well. So she was Silara in the first session. I don't really think it manifested much, so it didn't really matter. But now she's decided to go Astramari. And I think that has to do with the setup in Wormbone and the town itself. How Astramari is kind of very prevalent in town. But we'll see. I don't really know a lot about her yet. She did some fighting and has otherwise been kind of there, so I'm not 100% sure of her story yet. The last two characters are interesting. So we've got Gullick Gingrizzle. that name. Gullick Gingrizzle is a goblin. Surprise, surprise. Maestro Bard. So again, this is another thing where the two groups have some parallelism, because I have a Goblin Bard in the other group as well. The Goblin Bard in the first group is kind of a bit of a shuckster, and is like selling miracle cures and into conspiracy theories. Gullick is the opposite. Gullick comes from a noble line and takes everything very seriously, and is no longer like rich and wealthy, so is wearing a bunch of threadbare finery, and longs to be back in noble graces, but is currently on the outs. And Aelia and Gullick kind of struck up a rapport during this, but Gullick is definitely like pining for the riches he once knew, but is now poor and desperate on the streets of Wormbone. And really wants to get back into the world of privilege and wealth. But we'll see if he manages to pull it off. So that's Gullick. And then last we have Trinculust or Trank, who is a bright-eyed gloamling rogue. And Trank is curious and interested to explore the world and interested in seeing what can steal from the world, is a rogue. So, that's kind of the straight up setup there. So looking at their adventure, that's the 5 characters, and looking at their adventures, it starts kind of just like the other group, right? I mean, the intro for this adventure is pretty straightforward, right? They gather together because the tower is finally open. They're there for the announcement. And then the town council asks for signups. I believe this group was far more interested in the council and kind of learning a bit about them and learning about the politics of the city. I think some of this has to do with the fact that there were 2 nobles in the group who kind of instantly wanted to know a bit more about how that all works. So, unlike the first group, who was much more focused on, let's go on the adventure, this group kind of was a little bit more deliberative in learning a bit more about the town and the story behind it. They made some knowledge checks and things. And when it came time to sign up, it became kind of this jostling for who would go last, and folks kind of keeping an eye on the other groups. So they met the other two. They didn't meet them, but they saw the other two adventuring groups, the Thunder Company and Grablin's Lot, right away. And when Grayfen signed up, it was interesting because somebody crossed Grayfen's name off. I think it might have been Alia, who just wasn't interested in having another sneaky character in the group, but it didn't matter anyway, because Grayfen still accompanied them to the tavern. So they kind of did this jostling to see who else was signing up, and Gullick was busy accepting the adorations of the crowd without actually signing up, because the crowd was very excited. So there's a whole lot of kind of that going on. And when they finally did make it to the inn, right, because they get invited over to the Stonefang Tavern to, or tavern, not inn, to get a free ale, right, they're hanging out, and Grayfen is there, and this, just like with the first group, Grayfen is a character I added to the plot. That is another character who signs up, and is there to serve as a GM kind of tool to help get the players to introduce themselves, because he's very, very inquisitive. He asks questions. He's like, "Who are you? What's your deal?" And he's very friendly and very, very excited to be going on this. Trank and Grayfen kind of struck up a rapport right away. Two rogues, because Grayfen is kind of portrayed as a roguey type. But like, not everybody trusted Grayfen. I think there's a bit of metagaming going on there, because it's a character that I'm portraying, so they didn't really trust Grayfen that much. Drummond in particular was not interested in Grayfen's antics. But, I think all in all, that scene went fine. It took almost the exact same amount of time. So, like, for both groups, it took about, to get everybody situated, it's set up, and kind of talk a bit about... the very beginning, we talked a bit about Roll20 and stuff like that. So the intro took about, 30 to 45 minutes. Nobody offered Grayfen any lamp oil this time as a miracle cure. So no problems there. Everything kind of went according to plan. The next morning, right, we kind of then fast forward to the next morning. Grayfen doesn't show up for this group either. So, not that either group knows this, but, there's no sign of poor Grayfen on this table either. And that is honestly a scripted part of the adventure. Grayfen vanishes in both groups. So, no sign of Grayfen with the other group either. So the next day... right, the group is gathered up and they're ready to enter, and pretty much, that goes according to plan, right? So they enter the tower, they go inside, they're in the vestibule, right? And here, let me bring back up the map here real quick, just so that everybody remembers. So they enter the vestibule here in the south center. They go into that room, they explored a bit before making their way into the main chamber. Just like the other group, they found, the treasure in that first chamber. It's meant to be found. It's not exactly very obscured. They make their way into the main entry hall without really too much delay. In the main entry hall, they get attacked by the brooms and the animated coat rack. This kind of also went kind of similarly. As I speculated last week, both groups had new players. Both groups needed some time to kind of figure things out. So the first combat, which isn't a particularly hard fight, took a bit longer than normal, just because the players, some of the newer players were trying to figure out their turns and their actions and stuff. It's one of those things where I think, whenever you run a group for the first time, that first combat is always a bit more of a struggle. Just because people got to figure things out and, learn the kind of cadence of their character. That said, the second group I felt like had an easier time of this. They still took some hits, mostly from the brooms this time around. But I think the coat rack only hit once, and it was only for a handful of points of damage. But this group seemed to kind of glom together a little better. And I think a lot of it came from two factors. One, Gulick was casting Inspire Courage every round, making sure that the group had kind of their bonuses to hit and bonuses to damage. Because those, when you're dealing with something with hardness, a +1 bonus to damage is not nothing, right? Especially when the hardness is only like 3, right? You might hit, but only do 1 or 2 points of damage. Bumping that up to 2 or 3, well, frankly, if it only has 6 hit points, that's the difference between needing to hit it 4 or 5 times or 2 times, right? So it does make a big difference. So there was that. And then Trank was running around doing flanking sneak attacks with pretty good accuracy. Had a little bit of trouble hitting, but, first level characters, random dice rolls, they are what they are. So they took care of the fight with relative ease. They took a little bit of bruising. They did some healing, just like the other group. And then they just scoured the room for treasure. And I feel like they got almost everything. I think the second group did not find the dragon scale in the ashes of one of the fireplaces. But other than that, but they didn't shatter the crystal decanter either. So, you put loot in a dungeon, and there's a reason why I kind of have more loot in here than I think the group should actually have, because I don't think they'll find it all. And if they do find it all, it doesn't really actually unbalance them all that. So the loot in here is mostly things of value. It's things to give them coins. Low-level characters, frankly, giving them coins is and a handful of consumables is your best bet, right? I think somewhere in this is they're going to find their first +1 weapon, but that'll probably be in the second part. It's not in the first part. So, right now it's about gathering up coins, and this is the point where if you find a coin pouch with a handful of copper in it, you keep it, because it means something still at this level. So they ransacked the room. I think Gulick in particular was fascinated by the carpet in the center of the room, right? So if you take a look here, right, you've got there's like a carpet right in the middle of that room. He was very interested in that, and I think he even took it. Not worth particularly much because it's soiled and ruined, but so that happened. So at this point in time, the other group started filtering in behind them, right? You had the Thunder Company coming in behind them as well. So they felt the pressure. There was a little bit like, oh, can we wait? Or are they waiting to come in? And I'm like, no, it goes at your pace, right? It's fine. Do what you're gonna do. But understand that they're not going to wait there for hours. You can't make camp. And they did some medicine checks to heal up, and those went just fine. For the first level medicine checks are the ones that you are most likely to fail, because your bonus is only like maybe a 6, maybe a 7, something like that. And the DC is 15, so you've got a better than 50-50 that you're going to make it, but a good chance you failed. I think I've had one fail now between both groups. So they did pretty well on the medicine checks and got people healed back up and in pretty good shape. And frankly, this is when we were running low on time. So I was like, okay, so where are you going? And just like the other group, they hemmed and hawed a bit and tried to talk about where they wanted to go next. And ultimately, they decided to go west, whereas the other group went east. So I've got one group going towards. The first group is going to the room with the collapsed section here, and I just realized this map is a little off-center. Let me... There we go. So I've got one group going to the east, and that group is going towards the collapsed room. The other group went west. The second group here went west and has arrived at the room with the dining room. So they're heading towards the dining room. And when they arrive at the dining room, right, there is across the room from them, there is like a food cart, or like a serving cart, that suddenly animates and start whirling around the room because it's a haunt. It's a relatively simple haunt. Both the haunts in here are really designed to be more flavorful than seriously dangerous. This first one does a little bit of damage to everybody as it throws plates of food at everybody. The other one does a moderate amount of damage, but only to one target. So in both cases, they're both level 1 haunts, if I recall correctly. So I don't expect them to be incredibly dangerous in the grand scheme of things. I think the players are mostly going to be able to deal with them without too much trouble. So that's kind of where we paused. So this Thursday, the first group will be picking back up, and they're heading to the east. Then on Monday, the other group will play, and they're heading to the west. So that's kind of where we called it. In both groups, they both made it through the first couple rooms. They both went to a third room, and upon arriving there, that's where we hit time. So as far as game timing goes, and I realize a lot of it's on me and my pacing and things like that, I was relatively happy with the fact that both groups kind of took the same amount of time. They're not outpacing each other. Their relative skill levels of both of the players in both groups means that they're going to kind of take things at the same pace, at least for now. We'll see whether or not they kind of grok it and start picking up speed as we go along. But for now, that seems to be going a-okay. So, looking back at that first intro bit, thinking about all the parts in there, I think where I'm at right now is that just last night I finished principal writing on this first section. I had a couple things I wanted to tie up loose ends. I wanted to write descriptions of all the characters in both of the NPC groups, just in case your players want to interact with them a bit more. It's not really necessary, nor is it even really kind of made manifest. They don't come and talk to you, right? There's no direct hook. But the players might want to go chat with them, and I wanted to give a description of kind of what they look like, what their deal is, and how they operate. So I added that. And with that first chunk is now kind of written. I want to give it a read through. I want to give it a polished pass. I'll probably do that tomorrow night. And once I do that, then I'm going to want to lay it out quickly. This is a rough layout. And frankly, post it to all of you. So I'm hoping that by the end of the week here, you all should have this first adventure script, which will include everything I've been talking about up to this point, plus the entire layout of that first floor. So every room on this first floor is part of this. Let me just shrink it. There we go. All of these rooms are fully statted and fully written, so they should be ready for folks to play around with later on this week. Now, of course, I'm going to learn some things about them, so this isn't the final draft, but it is the draft I'm going to put up here relatively soon. So, what have I learned from that first bit? Well, I think the intro is a little long. I'm not sure I have too many ways that I can trim it up because it is setting the stage for a bunch of stuff, but it does feel a little long. Frankly, it takes about an hour to get to the first fight, hour to an hour 15, because you've got the whole first setup, you've got some role-playing bits. That's a little long, generally speaking. I usually like to get to the action in that first session sometime inside the first hour, and we're a little long on that front. But I'm not sure that I can really change it without doing something artificial, like having some fight or bar brawl or something, and I just don't think that's appropriate. So I think we'll live with that fact. Looking at the first fight, I don't really think there's anything I'm going to change about it. I was a little worried after the first group, but honestly, the second group mopped it up without a problem. And that's even with the Snarler Penumbris. But here's the thing. He's a Snarler Penumbris. So what did he do? He used his focus spell and created a Black Blade and was chopping up stuff using his weapon. So for him, it was not as hard of a fight as it was for the Jester Penumbris, who had no spells that would work on animated objects. So I guess I kind of just got to write that up to, there are going to be characters who aren't going to like every encounter you're going to cope with. And I don't really think I'm going to change it. Pressure distribution seems just fine. These first couple rooms don't have anything particularly impactful, but as they make their way through the outer rooms, that is where they are going to start running into objects that spark questions about the history of the world and speak to the story of this dungeon. So we'll see how that goes, but that is kind of how the rest of this works. So I don't really feel like I need to change anything either. All right. So, what do we have to look forward to? So, I've got two groups that are going to continue their explorations of this place. They're going in opposite directions. What's that going to mean? It's going to mean that both my sessions are going to be very different. They might end up overlapping by the end, but I kind of don't know, right? Both directions now have a haunt and a fight in them. One has a fight, then a haunt. One has a haunt, then a fight. And as a result, after getting through those sorts of, realized I'm being hit by the setting sun. We've reached that time of year again where the sun is starting to hit my office. I think, with the two groups, they're both going to take a bit of time on that. I expect that after I'm done with the haunt and the fight on both sides, I will have burned through a good probably 2 hours of the game. And that means they both might, kind of, if you look at the map, they both have 2 rooms to go through before they reach the center north room, which is where I added yet another fight. So what's probably going to happen is both groups are going to meet kind of in the same spot and have their final encounters both be the same encounter. So that should be interesting. Both groups did run into the Major Domo. So that chain of events has started, because that's part of that main hall encounter, is that once you're done with it, the Major Domo appears and bemoans the state of the place. Now, that said, it is very interesting because the first group is going towards the room with the centipedes, the collapsed room. And they know there's centipedes in there. That's where we ended on that cliffhanger. Both ended on the cliffhanger of something bad was about to happen. So for one group that was running into the centipedes, for the other group that's running into the animated food cart, I think the centipede fight is special because that fight is the one after which the Major Domo appears and talks to you directly and thanks you and complains that if only more things could get done around here. That one's the main hint that you can help him and that might be good. So one group's going to run into that right away, whereas the other group is not. So what may end up happening is the one group may go slower as they start fixing problems, whereas the other group may go faster, but once they hit that, they then may have to go back and fix problems. So it may kind of work out differently over time. We'll see. One of the things that is very valuable about doing this is that it is giving me a chance to kind of A/B test all of the components of this. Like, which direction did you go? There's technically 3 ways you can go, left, right, and north. And each one is going to give you a different experience for this dungeon. It's not a super complex dungeon. I think in the future we're going to see vastly different storylines. But this is kind of a sample of what is to come. So yeah, one is on the cusp of getting that hint. The other one is heading in the opposite direction. So that should be really interesting. I think, looking at the group that plays this Thursday, they're going to be centipedes. Once they're done with the centipedes, then they're in the room with the old game set. That is in the same room with the centipedes and some old documents and stuff. Nothing really too valuable in that room. But then they travel from there up to the northeast, and that's the parlor room. That's where there's the book haunt, where the Major Domo haunts the books and throws them at you. Not a particularly dangerous haunt. It does some decent damage as the books really flap into somebody. But that room also has some very interesting kind of lore bits in it, in that it has a map of Alnir on the wall from before Eventide. It has a book of planar cosmology that the players can take and learn about the planar nature of the world, and it has some handwritten notes in it from Wolfren, or did I cut that? I don't know, it might still be in there. I have to double. So that room's really interesting. And then with the other group, they start by going into the dining hall where they have the cart that's going to do the food fight thing. It throws food at everybody, but doesn't do a lot of damage. And then on top of that, there is a handful of interesting trinkets in that room. There's a magic item called a Ring of Potency. It's a ring that you wear that works like a potency crystal, but instead of being attached to the item, you just wear it, and you can use it on whatever item's in that hand, and then it crumbles to dust. So it's still a consumable item. You just don't have to affix it. Instead, it's a ring. Costs like a gold more. Nothing that special, but it is a kind of interesting, different way to use that item. And there's a tapestry in the dining room that features like an elven lineage. So one of the things that's going to become apparent as the players begin to explore this level of the dungeon is that Wolfren was clearly very interested in the elves who lived here before and the events of Eventide. Those things really start coming into focus pretty quickly. The first room has some elven statues in it. The main entry hall has some elven statues in it. And you quickly come to realize that that was kind of one of his subjects. That's not something that's generally talked about in the history of Wolfren. No one really knows what he worked on. So now you get a chance to find out, and the players are the ones who discover it. So after they're done dealing with the dining hall, then they go to the kitchen. Now the kitchen fight is a dangerous one because that's the oven. Now, so each one of these rooms has a bit in it that's like, well, if you don't go there first, then one of the other groups goes there first, or can. And if they do, they take some of the loot and they deal with the encounter. They don't defeat any of the encounters, but they do lessen their impacts. So, like, if the Thunder Company goes into the rooms with the centipedes first, they kill one of the centipedes. Whereas if they go into the room with the food fight, the food fight, there are less plates and dishes to throw, so it has a less effect. If they make it to the kitchen before you, they deal some damage to the stove before you have to deal. So you get easier fights later on in the adventure. This is done for two reasons. One, it allows me to put a lot of really kind of better treasure in here, but then you only get some of it because the other groups get some of it as well. So there's that. That's an interesting dynamic. But two, it also allows me to ensure that they make it through everything in one adventuring day, that they don't feel the need to rest, because the encounters, no matter what order they face them in, get a little easier as they go along because the other groups have already kind of pre-fought them or pre-dealt with them in some way or form. It's a trick I'm pulling to make sure that this entire thing, which is now, 6 encounters, and none of them are particularly hard, but 6 encounters is still a lot, that by the end of all 6 of them, you can still face all 6, right? You don't feel like, oh my god, we're totally gassed and we need to go rest. At least I'm hoping that's the way it plays out. We'll see. The second group actually used some resources on that first fight. Not a lot, but a speller slot or two. And, those things are not infinite. So we'll see how it goes. But the second group that's playing on Monday has to go and face the stove, definitely. And the stove is dangerous. That thing is actually kind of dangerous. Breathes fire, has a good attack bonus, deals some decent damage. But it also stops fighting you if you reduce it to half hit points, right? The moment it's at half, it unleashes a gout of flame and then falls over as if it's broken. It's not. It's just playing dead because it doesn't want to be destroyed. But not smart, but it has enough programming to realize it can't make food if it's... So that's kind of where both groups are heading, and I think both groups might make it to that final chamber, the one in the middle, in the north there, by the end of the next session. And that chamber now has a new fight in it. It didn't have one before. It has a living boulder in it that is just an elemental creature that's there to pull the lever and move the room, even though that doesn't work anymore. And the creature's been trapped in this room for hundreds of years now, and would rather be destroyed than stay here one more day. So it just appears and attacks the players. Not a particularly hard fight, but it is a different kind of fight. It's like an elemental servant that can't go home because of the nature of magic. And, well, Wolfren's been gone for several hundred years, so he can't send it home either. So, that room is the room with the tapestry. The tapestry is really large, can't be easily taken down off the wall. This tapestry is made by the elves and was made shortly after the days of Eventide to kind of commemorate those dark days. And it's one of Wolfren's most prized possessions. The Major Domo warns you not to touch it, not to take it off the wall. And if you try, he pushes you and throws you away. So, it actually counts as a negative if you're trying to help the Major Domo. Messing with the tapestry, the big tapestry, counts as a negative against that. So you really don't want to do that. And it's made kind of clear. We'll see whether or not the groups get it or not. It's also so big they can't easily carry it. It has to be like the last thing they take out of here because it requires like 3 people to carry. It's huge. Like one of those big 20-foot wide, 15-foot tall tapestries, right? And it shows Ilsan veneer with the broiling darkness above it, and it's there to get the players to. It's my attempt to show, not tell, the history of the world by kind of giving them objects that explain it. So once they kind of make it to that chamber, right, they can still go through the rest of it, right? The other groups will be exploring as well, and they can continue. So I expect that the player characters will explore all 7 rooms of this level of the dungeon. There's 8 actually, because I count the secret chamber as one as well. But that one you only get access to at the end of this part. So that's kind of where we're at. I'm interested to see how both groups do. I have a sneaking suspicion that their playstyles are such that both groups are going to kind of accomplish the same amount of stuff. But we'll see. I don't really know, right? This is the sort of thing where, you know, depending on what decisions they make and how they approach certain problems, and frankly, how the dice go, they could, you know, do drastically differently. One group might have serious problems, the other group might not. You know, a bunch of failed saves against centipede poison can spell doom, whereas, you know, a bunch of bad attack rolls against the oven and it scoring a couple crits could spell doom for that group as well. So you never really know kind of how it's going to play out until it does. So we'll see, and we'll let the dice roll where they may. But this time next week, come back here next Tuesday, and I'll have the recap of this entire thing. I don't think either group is going to polish off this part of it. To do so would require them to, you know, make it through, you know, 5 encounters in 3 hours, which is not likely. So I have a sneaking suspicion that, you know, now that I've got part 1 done, I'm already starting to spin up part 2. I'm wagering I'm not going to need part 2 for at least a few weeks still. But I'm going to have to get it ready just in case they exceed my expectations. So, yeah. And of course they do, yeah. No, that's very true. They do have hero points to spend. Sorry, I'm reading chat here. So, that's where we're at on that front. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about where we're at in terms of the project as a whole right now. This past week, I loaded up some new items. You can find those on the Minotaur Games site. There's some alchemical items. All the poultices, the base poultices are there. They're basically just 3 different types of healing poultices. One that heals wounds, one that helps with disease, one that helps against poisons. To kind of mimic some of the elixirs that they are based on. So all 3 of those are there at all the levels that they need to be at. In addition, I put up some new weapons, including kind of an interesting gloamling weapon that allows you to kind of try and stay hidden when you use it. So there's that. And so with that content, the player's guide is approaching completion. I have some spells I want to write. I have all the ideas for them. I just haven't written. I've only written a couple of them, so they're not quite ready yet. So I have some spells I want to get up. But other than that, the player's guide is approaching completion in terms of text written. I still want to get someone to give a development pass because there's a lot of rules content in there, and I still want to get an editor to go through it before I kind of march it close to final. But there will come a point in time where I make it available to all of you. All of the what I'll probably do at first is make it a PDF that's up on drive-thru, and I will send a free redemption code to all of the Eventide Masters and Lords, and then for the Scholars I'll send them a bit to get it at a half price. So this is probably going to be in its final incarnation, and this won't be the final incarnation. It'll probably be like a $20 PDF because it's 64 pages long with art and stuff. So just so everyone knows, that's how that's going to play out. I think what'll end up happening is anyone who buys it through this will get all of the updates as it moves forward, because I'm not going to have time to get an editor through it or anything like that just yet. But as it gets edited and as it gets developed further and refined, way before it goes on sale to the public, those things will happen, and everybody who buys it now will just get the updates as we go along. So you're only paying for it once, just so you know. Trying to figure out a way to make that work in a way that's equitable to everybody, right? And I think that's probably the way to do it. So there's that. Art. Yes, art. Let's take a peek at that. We got a handful of minutes here left. I want to open it up to Q&A here in here in just a moment. So, folks, if you do have some questions, I'll be game to answer them here in just a minute. But I do want to show off some art. So last week, I showed off a sketch of the Gloamling, and I'm going to kind of stay off to the side here so that it has. So here we have the sketch of the Gloamling, and you know, this kind of matches a lot of my description relatively well. Honestly, I went back to the artist with this piece in particular. I had kind of the most notes for, and my notes were along the line of, you know, hey, he's a little, they are a little too friendly, a little too cuddly. I want him to be a little bit creepier. So let's squish the head a little bit, make the head a little less round and a little bit more horizontal, so squished down. And then the mouth, let's keep it a little wider, and you know, let's go a little skinnier, like make them you know, a bit more emaciated. So I went to the artist, I gave him those notes, and notes for the other pieces as well, because I actually have this material for 2 other pieces as well, but I'm kind of waiting for some of that other stuff to do before I show it off. Gloamling here being a new ancestor, I really kind of wanted to get some of it out there quickly. So I've got this, and within days, I got a color rough. Now, this still is not a final piece. I gave a few more notes on this piece as well, but this is a much more refined piece and is much closer to what I want the final Gloamling to. So, everybody ready? Everybody ready? Here we go. So, this is much closer to what I wanted. The head shape is not quite circular anymore. It's got a bit of a dome to it. It's a little bit flatter. The mouth is a bit wider. I asked for a little bit of teeth. This, I believe, is a female Gloamling, but that they don't have very distinguishing characteristics. So there isn't a really good way to tell. But the character definitely came out kind of creepy, and I really liked how that kind of came together. So I'm really happy with the direction this is taking. I don't think it's quite there yet. I had a couple notes, a couple changes. But I like the addition of some jewelry. I like how it's like, oh, they're kind of cute, kind of not. I don't know what to think about that exactly. But I do like the direction this is heading. It is kind of an interesting, different kind of ancestry. And I'm kind of interested to see how it goes from here. So I mostly gave the green light on this. I think some of my changes were really kind of light and cosmetic at this point, but I do like the way it's going. Yeah, a little creepy. Gloamlings are supposed to be a little creepy. Just a little creepy. So yeah, so that's a big change, right, between these two pieces, right? I think, you know, this kind of friendly, looks like they might help you. This might help you, might also eat you in your sleep. You never know, right? Could be either. Right? May want to keep a watch. A little bit, yeah, little gremlin-y. Yeah. So, yeah, little cuter. That's where we're at. All right. So, there we go, folks. That is a first look at some of the art. And I'm actually going to, I think this coming weekend, I'm going to reach out to a second artist and start getting some spot pieces spun up. I really could use some additional spot work, some items, some, you know, little doodads and runes, and maybe some vignettes and things like that. Some place pictures and things like that. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. I think I'll reach out to a different artist for that. I've got Will doing a handful of pieces for me, but frankly, his time is a little limited. So if I want to get more pieces quickly, I need to diversify and grab some additional artists, which is fine. You know, almost every almost every game product you've ever seen has many, many artists who work on it. So this isn't a surprise here either, but I may reach out and try and get a handful of additional pieces for the player's guide. I want to make sure that there's a good amount of art in the player's guide. I can't afford, to do it quite to the level that Paizo can. But, I am looking forward to adding a handful of additional pieces, some pieces to kind of flesh out some other. So we'll see how that goes. I may try and do all 5 holy symbols as one piece of art. I'm thinking that I may try and get a drawing of Wolfren's Tower, which I can then double as the cover to the adventure as well, or at least use in the adventure. Yeah, other than that, I got some maps I'm working on as well, but those I'm doing myself. So that's where we're at. If folks have any questions, I'm open to answer some questions here. As always, happy to chat with all of you. Because honestly, you're making this work. You're a part of this that makes this happen, right? I find that I am the most creative when I have folks cheering me on, and then I'm accountable to, and that really does help. So having game groups is a part of that, and having all of you helps as well. Which NPC has been my favorite to run so far, and why? That's an interesting question. I think, honestly, Grafen has been a delight. But Grafen there haven't been very many NPCs for them to interact with just yet. They will get to, I think by the end of this, the Major Domo will be one of my favorites. Because they will get a chance to interact with the Major Domo a number of times throughout the first level of the dungeon. The Major Domo talks to you more and more the more you do for him. So, there is that. And, one thing that is interesting, I wonder if I can dig this up easily. I'm not sure that I can. Quite some time ago, I actually did a sketch of Wolfren's Tower myself, right? But I'm not sure if I can easily find it. Let me see if it's floating around here anywhere in a place that is easy for me to locate. I'm not sure that it is. Gotta be in here somewhere, right? You would think. Maybe. I'm not sure. Did the PCs ask what happened to Grafen? Yes. Both groups are very interested in what happened to Grafen. Neither one of them knows, but both are very interested in what happened to him. They just don't know what happened to him, right? Okay. Yeah, I'm not seeing it easily, but I did do a sketch at one point in time of yeah, I can't easily find it. I should have located it before the stream. I'll try and dig it up. I've done a drawing, just a hand-drawn sketch on my own of Wolfren's Tower. It's not the greatest work, but it's not bad. I went to art school when I was a kid, so I can do a decent drawing. How much have I planned as to what happens after the tower? Well, so after the tower, right? The tower is kind of the first part of this. So there's the floor that they're currently on, and then they get down to the laboratory down below. And the laboratory has a different kind of set of challenges. But when they get to the end of it, there's a barrier blocking their way. There's like a magical door that they can't open. And it can only be opened with Wolfren's ring. So that leads us to part 2 of the adventure. This is all of this that happens in the tower here at first is part 1. Part 2 of the adventure is trying to track down the ring. And so trying to track down Wolfren's ring. So it's kind of a explore the city, kind of do your own thing adventure. And this I expect is going to be the first time that the player characters really get a chance to kind of play with their own backstories and stuff. And this is the point in time where I'm probably going to work in elements from their backstories into each game. I haven't quite done that yet. I'm letting them gel a little bit, and then I'm going to mine them for interesting stuff. Finding the ring is a complicated kind of puzzle that requires them to go to numerous places in the city. And once that's done, they realize that the ring isn't in Wormbone, it's actually in Red Thistle. So that leads us to part 3, which is a journey to Red Thistle and back. And that comes with its own kind of myriad of adventures. And then part 4 is back in Wormbone, exploring the final bit of the dungeon and ultimately freeing Wolf, who is not dead. He's in a eternal slump. Tower Sketch will be found next week with some really odd name. I think it's actually just called Tower Sketch. I just don't know what folder I put it in. Around here somewhere. Yeah, Applebee's, that is really interesting because Grayfon is dead. But I'm not really saying why just yet. But that is going to be what happens. So the first group is really going to have a problem with that. So we'll see how it goes. But it should be a lot of fun. Yeah, I think it's going to be chaos. But we'll see how it goes as the groups try and make sure that everybody understands it wasn't them. So we'll see how it goes. Because, yeah, Grayfon's, he's dead. He got offed. But there's some obvious suspects, but it's actually a way for me to introduce another group of players. And by players, I mean another organization, another group, another force that is involved in this story that is going to be a challenge for the future. So we'll see how that goes. I'm trying to be a bit coy right now because I'm still kind of ironing out some of the details. And we'll see how that goes. And my partner's somewhere around here, and I don't. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. Yeah. So all things considered, I'm pretty excited for all of this. Pretty excited to see where this is all gonna go. Oh, I found it. I found the sketch of the tower. Let me go ahead and bring it in. Okay, so let me go ahead and bring this in real quick. I found the sketch. Just need to go up to, and here it is. So this is just a photo of the sketch. So take it what you will. But here you go. This was a sketch I did of Wormbone, and was actually part of how Wormbone came to be, how it came to be a town. I'm not in love with every aspect of this, but all things considered, I'm pretty happy with it. Here you go. So this is before I had the idea that the petrified skeleton was covering the door, which is why I'm not super thrilled with this piece, because there should be something covering up the door. But after I put this together, I realized, yeah, I could do that, and that could be part of the initial story. So this was just an early sketch that I did when I was dreaming about this setting and wanted to be creative, wanted to do something fun and creative. So yeah. That's Wolfren's Tower as I currently know it. I may use this as reference and send an artist a better get an artist rendering of this that is better than that. It's not terrible, but I should pay a professional to do it. All right, folks, that's about all I got here today. I want to thank you all for coming and hanging out. We will see you next Tuesday for another exciting stream. Hopefully we will be talking about how both groups had a successful and amazing time adventuring under Wolfren's Tower. Folks, we'll see you in just a bit for the other stream, but thanks for stopping by, and we will see you next time.